Now we're going to move ahead with the rest of our reflections, and I'm going to turn things back over to Charlie, who will continue to MC, and hopefully we will have a chance to hear about Danny as we enter the 90s and above.
It's always fun to introduce Brian. You know, I was reflecting back. I think I have sat on most everybody's thesis committee that's here. So you're all speaking the truth. That's really good to hear. So with that, Brian.
I hope you don't have one final question, Charlie. Well, hello, friends, colleagues, and faculty. I'm happy to provide some insights from my perspective on Danny's influence, both on me and in the industry. And as I heard John mention a minute ago, for those of us who may have come in with humble roots, or perhaps from other countries, etc., I think Dan oftentimes went out of his way to help us build confidence in ourselves through experiences that he would share or offer. And a bit like the elephant that was mentioned a minute ago, we've all had different experiences, but I'd like to share a couple in particular that might resonate with some of you as well from your common experience. So with that, I'd like to kind of lead with a summation. As I look at Danny's early years as a young professor, when I met him when he was close to being an institute professor, and then later tracking his progress as an emeritus professor, I kind of came across 5 themes, some of which have been mentioned by others in the previous presentations, but I'd really want to make sure that we recognize as being a consistent theme throughout his career. These include the sense of community. The reason we're all here is feeling that Danny has touched us and built a community that was 60 years in the making. The quality of his work and his high standards have been mentioned several times, and indeed, that it was a driver for many of us to excel in a way that we probably hadn't been challenged in previous work. The consistency, year on year, decade on decade, is very evident in Danny's progression. And lastly, the productivity during that period as well. And I also recognize his commitment to our community, his commitment to his students, commitment to those he partnered with, whether they be in industry or in faculty positions. And so the picture on the bottom right, by the way, is an interesting history for those of you who were there. You'll remember this was the AICHE conference where Ann Lee was given the DIC Wang Award for her contributions. Interestingly, she's not in the picture. She kind of jumped out of it thinking it was supposed to be an MIT-only picture. I really missed the opportunity to have had Ann in there, and I was thinking of photoshopping her in as a later touch. Now, this was a graphic that was generated for Danny's 70th birthday and published in Biotech and Bioengineering. This is the academic tree of Dan, his students, and any students of faculty that Dan mentored or advised. I remember seeing this for the first time at the reception, and I was just floored by the size of the tree and how many students or grand students had been influenced by Dan. And I leave the 5 qualities up there because I think there's a second dimension to this academic tree. And that second dimension are the many students who emulated Dan for those 5 characteristics. And that multiplied the number. And it's sort of a number of students and grand students times a drive that became the impact of this large community. So I arrived in '87. I was passionate about protein purification. And while Charlie and other faculty members had separation science projects available, I asked Dan if he had anything I could work on. And just at that time, he said he had a project remaining. And Alan Hatton is a co-advisor, and Dan and I closed out the reversed micellar extraction chapter that had grown up at MIT. but I arrived to a sea of upstream engineers. This figure came from the paper that Nubar and Charlie published on Danny's impact in biotech and bioengineering, and you can see the 6 major areas, thrust areas that Dan had worked in during his years at MIT and the number of publications in those areas. I think that little green oval are my papers, roughly. I haven't counted it out yet, but you can see I was kind of a lonely guy at that time, at least in the Wang lab. And yet above me in cell culture and in the fermentation swim lanes, there's a buzz going on, a lot of activity, man. That's where the action is. I remember asking Dan, I feel like I'm a bit of a minority here. Anything you can suggest? And he goes, yeah, why don't you pick up your lab and move to building 20? That way you could be embedded with folks doing mammalian cell culture at least. And I said, well, thank you very much for that opportunity. I'd be happy to do that. And feeling not like a stranger in a strange land, but instead someone who was welcomed into a group that was working in other areas and who would share their knowledge during lunch or at dinner, et cetera, or happy hour. And I felt I learned a lot by osmosis, just being present in that group and community. And Building 20 is going to come up again in a minute with another theme associated with it. I did manage to survive and graduate. This is a very precious photo for me. It's the graduation party after I had defended my thesis. And I couldn't help but notice a couple things. We're first setting the table for the after defense party, as you would see. But then I realized how similar Dan and I were dressed. With I had taken my tie off, but up to that point, we looked like twins separated at birth. The white button-down collar shirt, and one really important feature that I picked up after I developed the film. We both had pens in our pockets, but just now I was thinking great minds think alike. I realized that the student still learned from the master. You need to have a backup if you have pen in your body. BPEC, what an important contribution and what a great fostering ground for so many of us and the people we today manage or consult with or influence. Founded in '85, I came in a couple years after it was up and running, and it was already impressive in its breadth, in its depth, and later I saw in its durability. And so one of the opportunities Dan offered me a few years later after I'd gotten my feet on the ground was to be a member of the Industrial Liaison Group, and I was brought in to partner with Ed Osawa. I don't know if I know the lineage perfectly, but I believe Nubar and Mike, you may have been the first two, and I see you nodding. Did you hand off to anyone before Ed, or was Ed the next? Yeah, right. So I was kind of the grandchild of Mike and Nubar in a way, and it was great fun working with Ed, and I have a story to share. This is just a 4-year-old picture. Ed and I happened to be passing through San Francisco Airport, hadn't seen each other in a decade or more. Immediately recognized Ed because he hadn't changed. And we sat down for half an hour and traded notes, talked about what we had enjoyed as we worked together and went to school at MIT. And here's the story that made us laugh this hard. We had an important communication, a letter, that was to be sent for all of the 50 companies that were supporting BPEC research in anticipation of an ACS buyout lunch where Ed and I were to represent the research going on at MIT to the industrial faithful who were supporting it. That in itself was a great opportunity, I felt, to broaden my technical horizons and experience by making sure I could represent all of the supported projects that were being run at BPEC. So I had to learn what the upstream teams were looking at, what applied enzymology may have been going on in the Klebanov lab, and downstream processing as well. So Ed and I are putting together this mass mailing of 50 individual letters. Dan had already proofread the bulk of the entire letter. So the only heavy lifting that was left was for Ed and I to take the database of the industrial representatives and the document, the Word document, and just do a simple mail merge and print them out, right? Couldn't get any easier than that. If you had done a mail merge once in your life, well, Ed and I hadn't. So Ed's over in the computer, merges the letters, automatically generates a 50-page Word document. He goes, I'm printing it. I'm at the printer. So he sends it over to the printer. It's on BPEC letterhead, really nice quality paper. And the draft letter started, Dear Jane Doe, VP of Process Development, Company X, San Francisco, California, Dear 93128. And I said, Ed, stop the presses. I think we got a mail merge issue here. We got to put that field one lower. But I don't know who recognized this first, but the punchline that made us laugh in the airport was, you're more than just a number to us at BPEC. You're also a full zip code. So, but a great experience, and I really look back on that opportunity with relish. No. And I have to say, now's a chance to applaud the technical achievements and the influence on the industry of that big green cloud of upstream scientists and engineers who are working in mammalian cell culture. And one element of the tour de force was this picture of Building 20. This is the A wing of Building 20 where all the work went on in mammalian cell culture. I mean, I don't know what the B wing looked like or the C wing, but that's the A wing. And the mere fact that none of the cultures were contaminated with mold, I think, was a testament to, aseptic, which is why I was in purification. It was not for me. But on a serious note, look what's happened in the last year and a half in the COVID space. We're getting monoclonal antibody treatment for those who are presenting positive with COVID. 4 different companies have generated 6 monoclonal antibodies that have been authorized. Gene to IND has been a 50 to 70-day window for 3 of those companies. That's about 7 to 9 months faster than typical for monoclonal antibody development. Ton-scale production of these therapeutic antibodies using an industrial platform that was common in nearly every feature to all of these companies, and global authorizations within months. Now, we're going to hear tomorrow about an even more amazing achievement with regards to mRNA vaccines. But I didn't want folks to forget that in the backdrop on technology that was in large part influenced by scientists and engineers who studied in BPEC and in Matt's presentation moved out into the field and began to work with other good scientists and engineers, bring maturation to antibody manufacturing that really made this possible. And I think if we could have dreamt in 1987 or 1990 that this would ever come to fruition, I might have thought that would be science fiction. But it's now science fact. Coming back to the community, again, these photos are emphasizing what many have said a minute ago or earlier sessions, the importance of a good restaurant on the bottom left. The occasional poker game, that's Bob Kiss, for those of you who might remember Bob. And on the bottom right, my friend Rahul. And the reason this picture came up because I wanted to use to illustrate another opportunity that Dan offered Rahul and I. He said, Kelly, it's like 1990, you don't know anything about fermentation. And I thought, is it that obvious? Yeah, he goes, I think you should do a consulting gig. You and Rahul can go to a small company in Sorrento Valley outside La Jolla, and we'd like you to do optimization of late-stage E. coli recombinant silk production. And I said, okay, that'll be fun. I said, where are we going to stay? You can stay at my condominium. So Keith, where's Keith? We were there together for a while, if I recall. But I said, well, I have to go to La Jolla and stay there for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Yeah, but you'll go in January or February. Oh, no, please. Get out of Boston for 3 weeks? And that was a seminal opportunity to realize we can learn a lot in a short period of time and apply design of experiments that I'd never used before together with Rahul to work in that program. And before I come to the last chapters, the topic of cuisine has come up a few times, and I'd like to ask Vicki if Vicki's here. Yeah. Oh, you switched chairs. I thought you had an assigned seat. One of the opportunities I had to see Dan and Vicki after graduating was Charlie's short course in downstream processing, where I was invited to be a lecturer for several years. And I would look forward to seeing Vicki and Dan and Charlie at the gala dinner on Thursday night. And I have a question. I remember many times when it was time for the main course to be served, Dan was the first one to have his lobster bid on. And did he ever order anything but lobster? No, I didn't think so. It was always lobster, a steady diet. And if there was an extra one left over, we'd ask for that too. The bottom left picture you've seen a minute ago. The aftermath was the next morning in the upper right. We had a nice breakfast with a few other guests. You might recognize Gino Gromp, his wife Sue, Bob Kiz's wife Linda, and Dawn Orton in the front. Nice opportunity to have a breakfast together, reflect on the previous night, and again, extend that sense of community decades after graduation. And now to close, the reason I included the picture in the bottom left was that there was something in that bag, and it wasn't actually a gift for Dan. So in 1989, I'm still in school, and I thought, maybe I will explain to Dan, I can do fermentation, maybe it's only home brewing beer, but tell me what you think. So I gave him a bottle of one of my home brewed beers, and he responded with this note. I came in on a Saturday morning, and there was a note on my desk, and you recognize his handwriting. He goes, "This is a great bottle." Notice he didn't say, "This is a great beer," it's just a great bottle. I returned the bottle for recycling. Well, okay. And on this note were the following. My appreciations for your gift are attached, however, I did not brew the enclosed. This Beef Eater bottle of gin, these honey roasted peanuts, and this note. He must have just come off the plane, and this was like, it was on his tray, and it was like a poor grad student, he could use a, little snack. But I saved him all these 32 years because I'm a sentimentalist, and they meant a lot to me, and still do. So, and with that, I use that as an intro for the 70th birthday party. I said to the audience, I'm going to brew a batch of beer in honor of Dan, and to recycle that empty bottle. This was the label. For those of you who might have been in the audience, Wang Strong Ale. Not bad considering. And I can think of 3 ways Dan is like a good strong ale. A little goes a long way. It gets better with age. And for me, it was now not the strong ale, but just a very precious relationship in my life to have worked with Dan over the years and to have kept in touch with him. And so with that, I'd just like to honor his contributions to the community. Say here's to you, Dan, especially in the way that you nurture the community, that many of whom are assembled here or listening online. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Now, you've heard a lot about BPEC and the impact that it's had and how it brought people together with different disciplines and the like. Rahul Singhvi, who's about to speak with us, has created a BPEC on steroids in his new company. There's there has been an opportunity here for him to take some of the lessons learned and I think really demonstrate what one can do. As Art said, I can do that, quoting Dan directly. And here's another, I can do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. So it's a great privilege, first of all, to have this opportunity to pay homage to one of the great men in my life. And I almost consider myself as an accidental tourist here because I shouldn't be here. When I finished my PhD exam and we were looking for advisors, I had no idea what biotech was. I'd never done anything in biology. I was trained as a very classic chemical engineer. But for some reason, I had this intuition that this field was going to go somewhere. And so I said, well, who are the people working in this area? So I looked at the brochures, and I saw Professor Wang's name there. I said, I'm going to go and see him. So I went to his office in Building 20. And I said, I'd like to do a thesis with you. He said, young man, you're number 14. I have 4 slots. It's a low probability game. I didn't give up. I kept going back to his office, did my weekly pilgrimage to Building 20 to see him. I think he got convinced that maybe I had something, but he said, like, look, 10 people have gone to somebody else. You're lucky, you got the 4th slot. And that's how I ended up with Professor Wang. So I feel myself extraordinarily lucky that odds played in my favor to have the opportunity to work with him. The other 3 gentlemen who were ahead of me were Brian Kelly, Dan Lasko, and David Chang, who have built great careers. So I was in good company with them. Today I wanted to speak not as much about the science, but I wanted to talk about, through his actions and his behaviors, what I have been able to assimilate in my personality, in what I've learned from him outside of science. Because I think the greatest teaching for me as a PhD student was not as much about the technical stuff that I learned at MIT, but it was more about the other stuff. And that's what I want to talk about. The first thing is, once he took me as a student, he found out that I had gotten married. I had gone to India and came back married. I was 24 years old. He was very concerned. He said, where's your bride? How are you going to manage this? You don't have enough money. So I said, that's true, but I'll figure it out. I'm fine. It's like, no. You should really ask your wife to come and see me, because maybe we can get a job in the office. And that was incredible, because my wife, who's here, and she's actually here in the audience, the woman in the blue shirt on the left, and that's Dawn Orton on the right there. She got an assistant job with biotech and bioengineering. That was Professor Wang was the editor of that journal, and she took that assistant editor job, or some sort of a secretarial job, basically. And I thought that was great. And here she's with the rest of the staff in the BPAC, with Sonia and Lynn and Audrey, who were running the consortium. And Anushri, my wife, was there with them. That was huge for us. We talk about how he really cared about people. He cared about what was going on behind the scenes, not what's in the lab, but what's behind the scenes. Why is this guy going to be remaining motivated? What are the other concerns that they may have? And by resolving that, not only did he make life easy for us, but it created this sense of loyalty, which is why we are here today. All of us have been touched by him some way or the other. The kind of things that really people remember is not how much you know, it's how much you care. And that's fundamentally important for leadership. And that's what he showed here. Didn't say too many words, just did it. Just did it. And by the way, Brian, thank you for bringing up the consulting gig, because I definitely needed the money. Yeah, I wanted to learn the fermentation, but the money came in handy, man. It paid the bills. The other thing was the high standards. I mean, I was literally naive, came from India, had no experience, and here you see folks who had tremendous amount of experience. Brian on the left, Dan Lasko, who's here, Jack Pryor, David Chang. These are my classmates left. I was in the midst of some of the most advanced, most excellent students. And that was because these are the kinds of people that he took. And he also had very high standards. And he was very straight, as John said, he was very straight. I remember in one of the classes I took with him, 1059, I believe it was, biochemical engineering, and we had to do a project. And in the project, I was doing something about penicillin, and we had to calculate the number of the labor that was needed in the factories. I had no idea. So I took a book, and I found some formula that the author had put together, and he used that formula, and he just tore me in that review. Said, not only is it stupid what you did, but you plagiarized. It was an extraordinarily embarrassing moment for me, but it was a good training to deal with board members later on. It toughened you, and it was important. It was hard, but he cared, and he cared in a way where he felt like he needed to tell you the things the way it was, and it was something that stayed with me. Never make that kind of mistake again. He was obviously a disciplined man. Others have mentioned about his 5 to 5 routine, which he never gave up. I was amazed how disciplined, how focused, how consistent he was with his life. I'm just showing you pictures of some friends here. They have nothing to do with discipline, but I just thought that I had to put them somewhere. But I just want to acknowledge some of my classmates today. There's Greg Nyberg, Dave Stevenson, Troy Simpson, Mark Shilikoff. We're playing poker, Gautam Nair, Craig Zupke. Some of you may remember them, but this was our time. I think the biggest learning was this: be persistent and resilient. I had finally gotten in working with Professor Wang, but 4 years went by, and I had nothing to show for. Nothing. So I was, like John said, we did this one-on-one meeting with him, and he would do the same thing what he just showed, But then, he did something worse. He said, you know what? You're trying to get blood out of stone, man. There's nothing here. After 4 years. I was devastated. My mother would say, what the hell are you doing? 4 years have gone by. When are you going to graduate? And I was like, nothing, no answer. But, the good thing was he kept faith in me. He just kept on going. He said, yeah, you'll figure it out. Go figure it out. And that is such an important lesson. Go figure it out. This is what the difference between somebody who can do something and somebody who can execute and somebody cannot. Because life doesn't give you a clear roadmap. It doesn't. You may have a vision, you may have some resources, but how you charter that roadmap, if you're going to do something interesting, extraordinary, you got to figure it out. Nobody has that roadmap. And that figure it out part is what when I recruit people, that is the difference between somebody who will be in the company or not. That is the biggest lesson in the PhD program. To be able to be thrown out, not to be spoon-fed, but to get that muscle built, to be able to go and figure it out. You'll eventually get there, but you need to be tenacious. That's my PhD thesis. That's the day I graduated, and I'm so proud of that picture, just like you are, Brian. On the day of the graduation, he was the first to congratulate. And the other thing was that be resourceful. Be resourceful. You have to go and collaborate with other people. If you want to do something extraordinary, nobody's going to tell you what to do. And I learned that at MIT, trying to figure out how to solve a problem and go after 5, 6 different departments. And this is what Professor Wang always told me. You have to not only go figure it out, but solve the problem in a way which is going to be meaningful. And ultimately, after that day when he told me about not getting blood out of stone, you're trying to get blood out of stone, stuff worked out after that, and with Professor Whitesides and Don Ingvar at Harvard Children's Hospital and some other folks, we were able to put together something that ultimately that's one paper led to my PhD. But it was a collaboration, and that he fueled. He didn't ever feel like you had to stick to something that was in BPAC. You go out and figure it out. He wanted to celebrate. He liked to celebrate, and I've shown you two parts of that. On the left is those karaokes. He used to have these dinners in the Chinese restaurants. I think others have mentioned that. But in those dinners, we used to always sing. And that's one of those pictures, singing. And the second one, even when he had the stroke, he still wanted to be with the students and celebrate. And this one picture is taken, I believe, in 2019. And it was John Onens and his wife, and Nubar and myself, Nubar's wife, myself, Anushri. We went to see him and Vicky at the to have lunch with him. And he was so happy. You see him smiling, and I just was so happy that we were able to have that lunch with him. Lastly, I'd like to leave you with this. I think this is a man who always wanted to be in the arena. I think somebody mentioned earlier, I think John, that he was sending proposals even at very late stage in his life. And I remember going to his home, and that picture on the left is when he was asking me the same type of questions. Give me your business card. I said, I don't have one. But just give me your business card. What are you doing? He was curious. He wanted to know, and he wanted to ask about how can we collaborate, even at that point. And on the right-hand side, this is a picture taken when, I think it was in Pittsburgh, John Onens had been given that award, the DIC Wang Award. I remember being with there. Again, he came. He wanted to be in the arena. And he's still here. He's in the arena because of us. Thank you.
You notice in the theme in the program is roughly chronological. So it's now it's the youngsters who are coming onto the stage to share their recent story. I'll put Rahul in the youngster group too.
First of all, I want to thank Vicky and Professor Cooney for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So far the story you guys heard are all very big. My stories are small, but they are personal and authentic. So I started the Daniel Wang's group in the summer of 1993 in the summer research group preceding the official PhD program. I had just finished my chemistry degree in a tiny university. So this is when I first landed in Boston and MIT. This is exactly how I felt. I felt completely clueless, extremely insecure, and intimidated by everything. So I only met Dr. Wang once for that summer research. It was the introduction. So I thought he was friendly, like a Chinese grandpa to me in the Chinese culture, or maybe a teddy bear in American culture. And I now realize that sometimes first impressions are not 100% accurate. During that summer, I gradually learned from Rahul and everybody else that if Dr. Wang selects you in his group, you will be guaranteed for a job upon graduation. So that sounds very good to me. And then the only goal I had for the whole first semester of schoolwork was doing best and try to get into Dr. Wang's group. So but I didn't know that he took 4 students in your year. I was told 2 students every year. It was a fierce competition. So I hope I was doing well. And then I still recall, now I think all the dots connecting together, I heard Mike and Beth talk about some 26 out of 100. So I still remember my coursework. This is almost more than a quarter of a century ago. I did thermodynamics with Tester. I don't know, we shared the same professor. And then I think it was kinetics by Jensen, and then the mass transportation by Dean. So I still remember I got 42 out of 100 for my first thermodynamics test. I don't know, was it thermodynamics that you got the 26? Right. So when I heard that, I cried my eyes out. I thought, oh my God, my opportunity is completely closed. But later on, I learned the class average was 35. So I learned an important lesson early on at MIT. I think that lesson is very important for me and for life, schooling and sometimes life. It's all about relativity. So fast forward to 30 years later, my daughter is a freshman in college not far away from here. And once in a while, when she gets stressed about her test, me as a mother, the first question is always the same, you know, what is the class average, honey? You will be okay. So the rest of working hard to get into Dr. Wang's group, memory gets blurry. All I recall was I heard is incredible. He got a lot of funding that year, and he took 4 students that year, including myself and Araba, who's going to share her story later today. So I had my quarterly meeting with Dr. Wang to update my research. In reality, much of my learned came from my fellow group mate at the time, David Chen and Rahul, Greg Nyberg and Liang Zi and Steve Meyer and Mark Shelikov, many of them. So I'm very thankful for the help and friendship they provided to me. And here are some of the memories I had with Dr. Wang during my graduate studies. I remember that he was a very hard worker. Every Saturday morning, he was locked up in his office and worked very seriously. Although Dr. Wang was usually out of sight in his office with the door closed, I remember, if some of you remember Robert Bacarsel, he always bragged about the crucial technical discussion that he had with Dr. Wang in the Building 20 men's restroom. Arab and I think we're the only 2 girls in the group at the time, soon realized this huge disadvantage for us, let alone the fact that Robert Bacarsel was not even Dr. Wang's student in the first place. So I clearly remember that today. I remember we joked about that at the time. I remember that he was not particularly generous about compliment. So it was almost impossible to get any praise from him unless you're Liang Zi at the time. I also remember, I think Liang Zi is going to speak right after I do, so you guys can hear his story. I remember that he always in sound sleep in the BEAM seminar, and then only to wake up in the very end and ask the very hard and very harsh questions, right? So I don't know if that's continued to be the case upon my graduation. And I remember my first BEAM seminar was disastrous. And afterwards, he talked to me very seriously. He said, that seminar was awful. And he said, I will never, ever send you to a conference. So 6 months later, I was on the plane for my first professional conference. So excluding Dr. Wang's very tough outside, he did demonstrate kindness inside sometimes to me. I still remember that after I told him that my sister was living in Australia and I hadn't seen her for 7 years, Dr. Wang sent me to Australia for a cell culture engineering conference. It was, I think, around the year of 1996. So fast forward to January of 1997, when I had my last progress report with my thesis committee. I still remember, so since I just got engaged several months before my last progress report, I was eager to wrap up my PhD work and then move on to my next chapter of life. I still remember my thesis committee member, Dr. Wang, and then also Professor Harvey Lodish from Biology Department, and Greg Stepanopoulos from ChemE. So my thesis was on protein glycosylation, so I did quite a bit of biology work. So I still remember Professor Lodish liked my work, so he asked me in the end, he said, "So Sherry, what do you want to do now upon graduation?" So I really didn't give it too much thoughts. So I just blurted out. I say, "I want to get married." And I could still instantly tell Dr. Wang was very disappointed at my answer. He quickly said, "Sherry, we are not asking about your marriage plan here. What Professor Lodish is asking is whether you want to go to academic or or go to industry." Even today, I still remember the disbelief on Dr. Wang's face. As a student, I felt like I embarrassed him in front of his fellow faculty members. In the end, convincing Dr. Wang that I had done enough work and should graduate was not an easy task. I'm sure many of you had that conversation with him. And tears was inevitable. I still remember that Saturday afternoon in his office, and I brought up the topic. I do not recall the detailed conversation. All I remember was Dr. Wang wanted me to stay longer, and I left the office with 2 very puffy eyes. But I think he forced me to learn the skill of negotiation, and I convinced him it was time for me to go. It was probably my hardest conversation with him, but also the first of some tough conversations I've had in my professional life. Years later, this is the line sometimes I say to my coworker or to my mentees in the workplace. I had a very tough PhD advisor. It was tough, but he prepared me for the real world. In that sense, I appreciate his training. Fast forward to 2006, Dr. Wang and I had a breakfast together during ACS that year, which is my only meal with him alone. It was a very relaxing and cordial breakfast. He offered me some unsolicited career advice very passionately, which I did not act upon at the time, but I eventually listened to him and followed his advice 10 years later. He became very teddy bear-like again during that breakfast to me, just like how I remembered in that summer intern. Almost a quarter of a century later, upon my graduation, we're gathering here to celebrate Dr. Wang's life and his professional accomplishments. Over the years, the tears have dried up, and the emotional roller coaster of my graduate school experience is largely forgotten. But what's clear and vivid in my memory is a man who truly loved what he was doing, the passionate pursuit of academic excellence, and his nurture of his students. So this passion is still incredibly remarkable and vivid in front of me today. So it is this passion that we are here to celebrate today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We have another presentation from the same period, from the same year. You and Langshi were students in the same class. This will be a recording. We had really hoped, and I know that Langshi had also very much wished that he could attend, but again, travel these days, particularly from China, is problematic. So we have a recording, and I will introduce that now. I think technically, good. I see the heads going in the right direction, and the lights are coming down. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank Paulo and Charlie for inviting me to participate in this memorial symposium to celebrate Dr. Wang's great contributions, and I'm very, very pleased to share with you my memories of Dr. Wang and his impact on my career. I was a graduate student in Dennis Lab from 1991 to 1996. Many of you in the audience probably do not know me well, so I will share with you some of my personal background first. I was born in the 60s in a big family in the southern part of China. At that time, it was not an easy task for my parents to bring up 7 young children, so everyone in the family had to make some contributions. I did all sorts of field work when I was very young. It might be hard for many of you to imagine that I never traveled more than 10 kilometers away from home before I attended college. Basically, I was living in my own small rural area and did not know much about urban life or industry outside the world. When I was 17, I took a train for the first time and traveled over 3,000 kilometers to Dalian, a city in the northeastern part of China, to attend college. It took me 3 days to get there. My undergraduate major was inorganic chemical engineering, and I got addicted to computer programming in my sophomore year. My master's thesis was also on developing a computer software for process and energy optimization. I really enjoyed writing programs and debugging. So on the other hand, I had virtually zero exposure to biology or life science before I came to MIT. So I had to start with Introduction to Biology, a class I took with undergraduates when I entered Dr. Wang's lab. And guess what? Even the introduction course was too hard for me, both scientifically and linguistically, as evidenced by the grade B I got for that course. So you're probably wondering, how did I get into the biotech field and even managed to get into Dr. Wang's lab? Well, it might be hard to believe that it was actually all started with a department seminar I attended. It was on the development of TPA, a recombinant protein therapeutics for stroke. Although I did not understand most part of the presentation, but I realized that a life-saving protein drug was developed by a chemical engineer just like me. So I was totally impressed and thought, that's something I should do for my life. Although I enjoyed computer programming so much, it did not take me long to give it up and decided to get into a new field that I was totally a layman. I then made an appointment with Dr. Wang just to see if by any chance he could consider taking me as his graduate student. I remember the meeting was very short because my poor English and limited biology background could not really possibly allow me to have a long conversation. But the outcome was perfect. He actually said yes. To this date, I'm still puzzled by why he took me, but I know for sure that that was a major turning point for my life and for my career. After I had taken some basic biology and biochemistry classes, Dr. Wang and I started to talk about my thesis project. He told me that mammalian cell culture process was considered as a black box because cell metabolism involves thousands, if not millions, of different reactions. It's just too complicated. He asked me to figure out a rational instead of empirical approach to design culture medium. For this kind of project, you would imagine that it was better suited for someone strong in biochemistry. But it turned out to be an ideal project for me. In fact, my experience in computer programming, system engineering, and process optimization really helped me in tackling the problem and I was able to use my limited biochemistry knowledge to simplify the complex cell metabolic network into a single stoichiometrically balanced equation, just like a simple chemical reaction. With that, I was able to design basic culture medium and supplemental feed medium according to the stoichiometric coefficient of each nutrient cell culture needed. In that way, I could control the concentrations of dozens of nutrients with a single feed medium. The results were very exciting. In 1994, we were able to reach a 2.4 gram per liter antibody titer in a simple fed batch culture, a 45-fold increase from the batch culture control. During my 6-year stay at MIT, I probably had less than 10 formal one-to-one report meetings with Dr. Wang, roughly once per semester, in addition to the annual BEAM seminar presentation every student needed to give. Because like many other students, I was also scared of his tough and sharp questions. So I probably missed some precious learning opportunities. And that might be one of the reasons that it took me 6 years to finish my degree. But on the other hand, I really enjoyed the freedom to do my project in my own way. And in fact, I was having such a good time at MIT and at Dennis Lab that I almost forgot I had to graduate. On the other hand, whenever I needed his guidance, he was always there, asking the right question and providing the best advice you need. He always encouraged me to think beyond the box, be imaginary and creative. I learned a lot, many things from him. For example, his 777 working habits, the keep it simple and stupid principle, and the lost coin in the dark story. After graduating from MIT in 1996, I joined Merck at West Point and worked there for 6 years on viral vaccine process development. Dr. John Honest, who graduated a couple years ahead of me from Dr. Wang's lab, was my boss and mentor at Merck. From John, I learned how to develop a process for vaccine production. In 2002, I thought it was time for me to come back to China. So I came back and started Sinocelltech as a one-person company. In the last 20 years, we have been focused on the development of biological medicines with unmet medical needs in China. We have developed in-house a rich product pipeline, including recombinant proteins, monoclonal antibodies, and vaccines. For example, our first product, a recombinant factor VIII protein for hemophilia A patients, was approved in China earlier this year after more than 15 years of process and clinical development. Our third generation 14-valent HPV vaccine just entered the phase 2 trial last month. Our COVID-19 neutralizing antibody is currently in phase 2-3 trial in US and South America. And our second generation bivalent COVID-19 recombinant protein vaccine is going to enter human trial soon. Over the years, Dr. Wang made many trips to China, and I also made a couple trips to Singapore to meet him there when he was teaching there for the MIT NSU joint program. In 2007, I decided to set up a new company to focus on development of biological reagents as research tools. So I emailed Danny about my plan, and to my big surprise, he offered to invest a big sum into the new and risky startup. That was totally unexpected because I remembered he once joked with me not to invest any bloody money into the risky biotech stocks. In the first 10 years of operation of Sino Biological, we actually never held a board meeting or prepared an annual financial report. He just let me do whatever I needed to do with full trust in me. When we met, we rarely talked about the Sino Biological business. Instead, we often talked about new ideas he came up with or new projects he had in mind. Today, Sino Biological is becoming one of the leading biological reagent companies and CRO service provider worldwide. We were able to produce the key proteins of SARS coronavirus 2 in a record 11 days after the gene sequence was first deposited into the public gene bank. And we provided these key reagents to more than 1,000 customers worldwide for their COVID-19 related research and development work, such as basic research, neutralizing antibody development, vaccine development, and diagnostic kits development. So I was very happy that we could actually make some contributions for the control of the pandemic. Today, we are gathering at MIT to celebrate Danny's great contributions in education, biochemical and bioprocess advancement, biopharmaceutical product development and manufacturing, and so on. I'm very grateful to this great man for his impact on my life and my career. I owe him everything that I have achieved today. I'm very proud to be one of his students and friends. I'm also very pleased to tell you that with the contributions from Danny's former students and friends in China, we were able to publish a special memorial issue on synthetic biology in August this year. Sino Biological is named after Danny in Chinese, so Danny's legacy will be remembered forever with Sino Biological, as well as in our heart. I'm not a person who likes to take pictures, so regretfully, I did not take many pictures with Danny. This photo was taken in 2013, when Danny took his last trip to Beijing. He was the honorary chair for the 18th Biochemical and Molecular Engineering Conference in Beijing. So with that, I conclude my talk. Thank you all for your attention, and my apology to all friends and colleagues for not being able to join you at MIT. I wish you all well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yet another example of I can do that, that we continue to see as a theme throughout the entire afternoon. Araba, please join us for yet another later chapter with the younger generation.
So despite supposedly being part of the younger generation, I do need reading glasses. So good afternoon. I'm Araba Lemazé-Smith. I was a student in Dr. Wang's lab from 1993 to 2000. When Professor Cooney invited me to participate in this Daniel I.C. Wang Memorial Symposium to share memories and remembrances of Dr. Wang, to honor his legacy as a pioneer and mentor, I did not hesitate. Last fall, I lost two elders who nurtured and watched over me in college and graduate school, one of those being Dr. Wang. I'm honored to be here this afternoon, and I'm glad we're able to gather in person and virtually to celebrate him, his pioneering accomplishments in biochemical engineering and the biotechnology industry, and his influence on us. Dr. Wang, and in my mind he will always be Dr. Wang, I cannot call him Danny, began to impact my future path even before I knew about him. The summer after I graduated from high school, I participated in an NSF undergraduate research program at the University of Maryland Systems Research Center, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Department of Chemical Engineering. My project that summer was in Professor Ted Cadman's lab, working on developing a defined medium for recombinant enzyme production in Streptomyces. About a year later, in September of 1989, Dr. Wang was appointed by UMBC Chemical Engineering Department as a visiting distinguished professor. My father, who at the time was a professor in the Department of Africana Studies and has a love of science, was on a faculty committee with Professor Cadman and serendipitously was introduced to Dr. Wang. They had an enjoyable conversation from what I hear, which apparently included talking about me and my interest in chemical engineering. Shortly thereafter, Dr. Wang sent me a letter letting me know about the BPEC REU summer program in which non-MIT undergraduates could participate and encouraging me to apply. So I applied, and in the summer of 1990, I was accepted into the REU program. Upon arriving to MIT, I had my first introduction to Dr. Wang in person. He immediately put me at ease with his welcoming smile, which we've been seeing this afternoon. That summer, one of the lessons I learned, aside from BPEC's education coordinator, Sonia Foster, who we saw some photos of earlier, teaching me how to make coffee in Building 20, was that asking challenging questions should be expected and can lead to good discussions for learning and better solutions than had those questions not been asked. Graduate students were required to participate in BEAM seminars, as we've heard about many times today, which, despite assurances in the intro letter for the REU program for the equivalent summer undergraduate series stating, "Relax, it's fun," were fairly anxiety-inducing, at least for me. At the BEAM seminars, as Sherry has related, there would be occasions when looking around the room, everyone would be convinced that Dr. Wang was asleep, not hearing a word of whatever was being presented. Then all of a sudden, he would open his eyes and ask the most probing and salient questions, really making sure the justification or logic of the data and information were sound. The expectation Dr. Wang set of technical rigor manifested through his questioning is a behavior I notice I've unconsciously modeled throughout my career. I find myself asking my colleagues questions when data or strategies are being presented, not necessarily to disagree with or challenge them just because, or because I have a great alternative conclusion, rather in an effort to keep learning and collaboratively find the best solution, interpretation, or strategy. From that first summer at BPEC, Dr. Wang was a great champion and mentor to me. Due to strict rules regarding the dual degree program at Brown, I was in a position of needing to transfer to finish my undergraduate Chem-E degree. Dr. Wang not only advised me on schools to consider for transfer, he wrote a lovely recommendation describing me and the summer RU project I did with Ed Osawa in Cooney's lab. Later, when the time came to pick a graduate school, MIT was at the top of the list, and luckily, I was accepted. In the first year of the graduate program, you have to identify a thesis advisor and project. Naturally, I wanted to work with Dr. Wang. He had a reputation as a tough and somewhat intimidating professor, but the summer I had spent in Building 20 and his interest and guidance made me sure that if he would take me, I would be in good hands. My initial thesis project was related to mixed culture for amino acid production. I was well down the path in researching and thesis project preparation. I had even presented my proposal to my thesis committee when I hit the first major stumbling block in my graduate education. The grant funding the project was discontinued, and as a result, I no longer had a thesis project. Dr. Wang advocated with the department's graduate committee for a 9-month extension for me to come up with a new thesis project, emphasizing that because of the circumstances, I should not be penalized for not meeting the requirements of the program. As we quickly worked to come up with a new project, he not only challenged me to beat the new extension deadline, he made sure to keep my spirits positive in the face of this early setback, counseling me to take it in stride as part of something that can always happen with research. That lesson in resilience and pivoting to continue forward progress has served me well at work when circumstances have resulted in needing to quickly come up with an alternate solution. As my eventual thesis research neared its end, I was anticipating a successful final progress meeting with my thesis committee and looking ahead to defending and finally finishing my degree. But the progress meeting outcome was mixed, another setback. Again, Dr. Wang was my champion, positive that together we could come up with a plan to address the technical feedback given by my committee, but more importantly, encouraging me to persevere, that we would overcome. These challenging bookends to my graduate career could have easily resulted in me leaving MIT early or without a doctoral degree, at a time when the total number of Black women with a doctoral degree in chemical engineering could easily be counted on 2 hands. Dr. Wang's strong support, mentoring, and guidance ensured that I reached the goal I had set for myself. Dr. Wang demonstrated to me the value of leading with compassion, always with an aim to challenge and motivate the individual to measure up to her full potential. As managers and leaders in biopharmaceutical companies, we are expected to deliver to corporate and portfolio goals. In the organizations I have worked for, these can often be with resource constraints or under aggressive timelines. It can be easy to deprioritize training, mentoring, and staff development when there's so much to get done. But I learned from the way Dr. Wang treated me that is equally important, even while setting high standards, to also listen to my staff and what their interests and needs are in order to provide them chances to develop their skills so that they can take advantage of future opportunities if they desire. From his advocating for his students, the importance of backing my team in situations where they are doing their best to persevere has been clear. For example, in the past 20 months, due to pandemic-related supply chain challenges in biopharmaceutical manufacturing, many of you know what I'm talking about, it has been critical to make my confidence in my team known to my management, but also to emphasize to my team that I'm confident in their work so they don't become disheartened and discouraged in the face of strong headwinds. At some point at my time in MIT, maybe even for the first time during my REU summer, I heard something along the line of, if you can make it through the Wang lab, you can do anything. Initially, I didn't put a lot of faith in that. I was just trying to make it through MIT and the doctoral program. But it is a truth that is held each time my career has taken a non-traditional turn, or I've been asked to take on a task with which I have no experience. The training I got from Dr. Wang in research, designing an experiment, executing it, and evaluating the results have held regardless of application. His support in navigating through the challenges of a doctoral degree nurtured my confidence that I could contribute and be successful. My PhD thesis work was in microbial recombinant protein production, yet my first job post-PhD was as a scientist at a contract development and manufacturing organization assigned to do purification process development on a client's late-stage biopharmaceutical clinical program. It was daunting, but using the skills I learned in the Wang lab, I was able to be successful and contribute to a biotherapeutic that was ultimately approved by the FDA. My professional career journey started in purification process development, moved into program and alliance management, and now I lead supply chain. So even though I didn't have any formal background in any of those areas, when I've taken them on, I've thought, you made it through the Wang lab, you can do anything. Each role I've had in my career since MIT has not only built on what I've learned along the way, but has leveraged the foundations of scientific logic and approach, rigor, and confidence that were a result of Dr. Wang's coaching and guidance. Dr. Wang was a caring teacher and mentor who had an indelible effect on me and others. He expected and challenged all of us to excel. About 15 years ago, many of us convened here to celebrate Dr. Wang's 70th birthday. One of the most impressive items that you've seen earlier this afternoon that was put together at the time was the Wang tree, a kind of family tree showing the branching of his students and subsequent propagation of more offshoots. That tree has grown even more since then and is a testimony to his accomplishments as a pioneer in the field and his enduring legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Arba. I like the allusion to the tree, that the tree continues to grow and expand. And that's exactly what is happening as a consequence of so many of us in this room. Last but not least, Brian Baines, we're ready for you and to hear your thoughts and reflections as the young kid on the block.
Last but not least, but youngest. I can take that. It's not often I get to be the youngest in the room these days, so I'm happy about it. Okay. Thank you. Let's see if I can work this. So it's a great honor and privilege to be here and be part of this family. It just celebrating and hearing the stories and sharing stories. It's just brought back a lot of great memories, so it's an honor to be here. I want to start with this picture, which I made actually for the meeting that Liangzi showed the last time Danny was overseas. And at the time, I took all of his abstracts and created this word cloud. This is the only technical slide, by the way, if you can call it technical. But the color doesn't mean anything. The size of the words is proportional to their frequency in his abstract. So I hope we can all find a little bit of us and our work in here somewhere, but it's a heck of a legacy just in the publications. But of course, as his students, we got to know him a lot better than this, a lot more up close and personal, as you've heard in the story. So I want to share a few lessons that I learned that I hope are more general, and then also a few personal stories this afternoon. So the first lesson was, and you've heard this from some others too, discipline really matters. So he was a guy that, I guess he was in the lab at 5 a.m., in his 40s and 50s. Even in his 60s and 70s, when we worked together, he was in there at least by 6. So this was a man that was dedicated beyond what, most of us probably would do. He understood the time was precious. He was always on time for everything. I remember that when we were in group meetings together, which often would start at 8 a.m., and several faculty participated, and Danny was not the lead of this particular group, but when his watch hit 8:01, he would say, "It's 8:01, let's start." And we just learned this discipline very early that, there was going to be rigor, even down to meetings. And as a good former Wang student, I've tried to collect some forensic evidence of some of this, and I think, you can see the Lieutenant Wang in these pictures. I'm sure the Army discipline was no problem for somebody, with this kind of sharp attention and attendance. And looking a little further back, we see that he, in his elementary education, earned straight A's for his work habits. So even as a young man, he clearly had this skill. He also was quite adept at arithmetic, as many of us learned the hard way in some of these seminars that you've heard a lot about. Often when his eyes would pop open at the end of the seminar and the first thing out of his mouth would be, "I've just done a back of the envelope calculation." And usually this means that the speaker should shudder with fear and probably try to get out of the room as quickly as possible. There was some major problem there, but we all survived. He encouraged us, admonished us, I guess, to get our hands dirty with everything. So there certainly was the 10,000-foot view that we've heard a lot about, and he wanted to see the big picture, but he really did like it if the details had to be real. And he would ask questions to go into these details and make sure that we understood them, and he was going to push it. And the evidence I was able to find on him here, obviously there are the stories, but even as an institute professor, here he is doing maintenance on a fermenter, checking conditions. I've seen a few institute professors in the lab, but it's a rare sighting. This is a rare picture. And of course, teaching and working the numbers, and then even having some fun getting his hands dirty, over the grill. He was leading by example in all of these pictures. We've also heard a lot about how he encouraged everyone to work on commercially relevant problems. This was particularly interesting, I think, in my generation because he had well-established relationships with so many of you and a lot of the industrial companies. And as students, we wanted model systems that were easy. We wanted to go to Sigma and buy the reagent and compare it to all these other papers that had been done with the simplest thing that was easy to reproduce, make these experiments run great. And he would say, no, you're not doing anything with lysozyme or something easy. You're going to get GCSF, you're going to work on EPO, you're going to work on something that's commercially relevant. And the extra effort was absolutely worth it. I mean, we developed important relationships. I remember having meetings with Danny where he would just turn around and pick up the phone and start probably calling people in the audience here to ask about, hey, can we get, we need a little bit of this EPO for a project. Oh, by the way, would you like to be on the thesis committee? And it was immeasurably valuable in helping us build those connections and helping us start to build our own networks. We know that, of course, the PhD work and our careers are not sprints, they're marathons. And so he would always think about our durability and our health. Were we taking time? He wanted us to work hard, but he wanted to make sure that we were doing well in doing that. Even as a young man here, Danny was also a tough guy. This is the Washington Post, and I don't have the year, but it was when he was in high school. And at the time, as a multi-sport athlete, he was already being recognized as a tough, dependable kid. And I think it's interesting to see he was already kind of figuring out how to assess the quality of a game or the toughness of a game by his aches and pains. And it's also interesting to note which side of the football that Danny liked to play on. So this American football is just basically very physical, head-to-head collisions, very struggle of a game. And he said, he's quoted in this article as saying with a mischievous grin, on offense you have to take it, but on defense you can dish it out. So imagine Danny now in that seminar in a three-point stance in the back of the room, ready to ask you a question. And I think we all have experienced that mischievous grin in the back of the room. Okay, now a few personal stories. So our first meeting was funny. Actually, I just realized there's a relevant thing here in this too. So in our first meeting, the very first question he asked me, and it defined him, of course, and everybody who knows him, well, this won't surprise anyone. The first question he asked me as a prospective researcher in his group was, what's your GPA? Oh my God, it just gets right to the point, right? Luckily, I passed that test, but I wish I'd had this evidence then, because maybe I could have slightly leveled the field. I don't know, not really. But the second question he asked was about what I wanted to do, and I had come to MIT after a career, starting a career in the oil industry, actually, because I was looking to make some change, broaden myself, but also because there were so many different types of opportunities here, and I thought there might be a change in my future. And I talked about academia as one of the possible routes, why I hadn't gotten an MBA or something else. And he told me point blank, he's like, you're not a professor. This was in our first meeting, 10 minutes into the meeting. And again, I was taken aback. But he took it upon himself to mentor all of us in a way that he thought was best for us, which I think speaks a lot about him as a mentor. We've heard the individual touch from many of the folks before me today. He mentored some of my contemporaries to become professors, to become successful professors. And he didn't take that direction with me, and I'm thankful, I guess, that he didn't, because it's been a lot of fun, the path that I've had. The other story that some of you have heard me tell is that I asked him when it was my turn to ask a question, which did come, I asked him, what does it mean to be an institute professor? And he just pointed to the couch in his office and said, you see that couch? It means I can sit on that couch all day long and no one can say anything to me. And true, I guess, but here he was again in his late 60s at the time, or 60s at the time, who was at the office at 6 a.m. talking to a prospective researcher in grad school. So clearly he wasn't just on the couch, which I'm thankful for that. Our discussions about career turned towards maybe startups would be interesting. And so in that way that he always would do, he turned around, picked up the phone, and he's called a few people in local companies and said, hey, would you host my student for a summer or for something? And so he literally got me a job in about 2 minutes. And fortuitously, that led to me meeting Nubar. And lo and behold, it was a profession, to this entrepreneurship and startups. And I have Professor Wang to thank for that, and the Wang family to thank for that. Then after we got into startups, I remember the first time someone offered me stock options. I'm thinking, geez, what's this? I better, Professor Wang, what is, how should I think about this? I mean, I'm used to getting paid the money, and what is the stock options? And like the gambler, I guess, that we've heard a little bit about, he just looked at me again and just said, do you believe in what you're doing? And do you believe in yourself? Take all stock. I'm thinking, oh gosh, but he really meant it. And I guess if your mentors are people like Danny and people like Nubar, this is very good advice. Maybe the most important story here. So Danny took, obviously family was something very important to him. And he really expressed that to us as students. He would always talk about how much he loved Vicky and Keith, and how much Vicky, in fact, had enabled him to be successful in life. And it really made a strong impression on us as students to hear these stories from such an accomplished mentor. But he also took an interest in our personal lives because of this interest. And my wife, who's here with me, was a master's student in the department and got to know Danny when I was working with him. And he would always ask me, what's going on with this, relationship? What's happening with you and Megan? What's going on? And I would always hem and haw. I was definitely not as good at this relationship part as maybe taking tests or, fermentation or other things. And so Professor Wang got very frustrated with my hemming and hawing, decided to take matters into his own hands. So I think it was an occasion of his 70th birthday, if I remember, Megan's shaking her head, that he corners Megan and says, so what's going on here? What's taking so long? And then she's hemming and hawing now. She's doing this because, of course, we're trying to figure this out. And he gets tired of it. And he says, just marry the guy. And I'll never forget when I heard that secondhand because I wasn't present. And I also heard that maybe some more colorful and persuasive language was used, hence guy. You can insert some nouns in there that might be interesting, referring to me and probably accurate. But thank God it worked. So these are my stories. Certainly, it's been an honor and a privilege to be part of this family. As I said, I mean these gifts of life lessons of a career, they're very special. The gift of family and the lessons of family, they're eternal. So thank you to Professor Wang. It's been a great honor to have been your student.
So wow, I can do that. Resilience, encouragement, no bounds. Really, we've heard some incredible words about Danny Wang today. Now it is time for us to get ready to spend time at a meal celebrating Danny's life. So I'm going to encourage you to hold on to your name tags so that you have them for the dinner and for the symposium tomorrow. And we will meet at the dinner location at Sandberg Center. If you need any help with directions, we have folks in the back who can help you. But I hope to see you in a few minutes. The reception is starting very soon. Thank you.